PaRappa the Rapper is one of the coolest collabs between East and West. This PlayStation pop only had 3 main games, but the story behind them connects to Jonathan Ross, Mystery Science Theater 3000, and Chris Chan. And that's not all. His series' music is connected to Bon Jovi, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Pokemon. Today on English Version Files, we're putting the spotlight on PaRappa the Rapper, looking at the original 3 games, the arcade game that was lost media until recently, the anime and why it never received an English dub, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, yes, even that part of the story, a failed spiritual successor Kickstarter, and more. But before we begin, a few things. First, let me know in the comments what your favorite song is in the PaRappa series. Mine is Toasty Buns from PaRappa 2, with Got to Move from Jammer Lammy as a close second. Second, this episode was made as a thank you to everyone that donated to Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio through Extra Life. Thanks to you, we raised over $500 for the hospital. You made an enormous difference for many kids. And third, huge thank yous go to Amber Jones, aka Amber the Fangirl, for her fantastic interviews with folks that have worked on the PaRappa games, and for some additional help through DMs, Mike Scholars for his wonderful book about PaRappa 1 dissecting what made it so great, providing some interviews with staff members, and sharing personal anecdotes, and Cameron Perry and Jacob Collins for providing some help with a later section of the video. Without further ado, it's time to talk about PaRappa the Rapper. Strap in, folks. The PaRappa series was created by musician Masaya Matsuda and developed by his studio Nana Onsha. Matsuda devised the concept of the game in 1994 before the PlayStation even launched, and 2 people brought on board would help bring his vision to life and give it some Western flair in the process. The idea was always to have software with paper-thin characters performing call-and-response rap music. The main character would perform these songs with teachers in the form of a lesson. Matsuda was fascinated with the rap genre. It had so much potential, freedom, and interactivity. The musician turned game dev further added in an interview with the Japanese magazine The PlayStation, quote, "Perhaps another reason for my attraction to rap is that I can't rap in English at all. I guess I had a kind of subtle mental complex about it, which made it all the more fascinating to me," unquote. Matsuda may not have been able to rap in English, but someone brought on board the team would bring that to the project. Bilingual Japanese rap artist and radio DJ Ryuichi Ru Watabe. That's how he himself pronounces it, Ru. His fluency in English led him to writing the lyrics and providing temporary dialogue for all the characters from PaRappa to Sunny Funny to every single teacher. Watabe took the dev team's storyboards and scenarios, listened to the music track, and whipped up a freestyle rap in English on the fly, a skill developed in part from his experience as an interpreter for CNN. He'd then take what he had recorded and build upon it, one of the trickiest aspects being the rhymes. Beyond dialogue and a temporary voice, Watabe contributed one more thing critical to PaRappa's identity, his catchphrase, "I gotta believe." This was Watabe's quote-unquote go-to phrase in his work and was going to be the title of his debut album. Watabe stated the motto, "You gotta believe," was used by his high school football team. He shared in a Japanese PaRappa guidebook, quote, "I think you've always got to keep a positive attitude in life, you know? Many Japanese are so pessimistic and negative, so I thought, hey, they need this phrase, and I gave it to PaRappa," unquote. This chant of self-confidence would become a defining character trait of PaRappa. The second person brought on to bring PaRappa Western flair was Rodney A. Greenblatt, an illustrator from New York, as the game's visual designer. Prior to Greenblatt coming on board, early animation demos of what would become the PaRappa world used characters from a PC game Greenblatt made the art for called Dazzloids. Greenblatt's 2D art would be preserved in a 3D space with these paper-thin characters. PaRappa is a play on the Japanese onomatopoeia PaRappa, which means paper thin. The idea was there, but nobody really knew how the final product would turn out, or if it would be successful. Given they were working in Division 0, which worked on miscellaneous titles, there was no real pressure to make PaRappa a big breakout hit anyways, so the team just had fun with it. Nobody was sure if Sony stood a chance against gaming industry giants of the day Nintendo and Sega, so the company was taking anything and everything when it came to games and other software. Greenblatt resided in the US but went to Japan a couple times a year. At the time, Greenblatt was already working with Sony Creative and had merchandise with 4 characters he designed. 3 of those characters became characters in the PaRappa the Rapper universe: Sunny Funny, PJ Barry, and Katie Cat. The one that didn't make the cut was Pony Pony, a girl with a ponytail, although she does appear in the game on a poster in PaRappa's bedroom. Sony Creative was quote-unquote overjoyed these characters would prominently appear in a piece of PlayStation software. Greenblatt designed every single asset in the game, including the characters, all of whom he named. With the team's storyboards and scenarios, Watabe's temp audio, Greenblatt's art and placeholder for PaRappa, and some CG wizardry, the game looked a little something like this.
John Wayne was really awesome. Oh yeah, he can really beat Superman, I bet you. Shut up, man. He sure is my dream.
That placeholder character had to go. While it was easy to bring over PJ, Katie, and Sunny since they were already made, the team still hadn't decided on their protagonist. In early storyboards prior to Greenblatt being officially on board, the lead character was a shrimp. Yeah, it didn't take long to axe the concept of a rapping shrimp. Greenblatt was given a description of the game's lead character and had the idea of making him a dog. After a few design sketches went around, the team landed on the character we know today. Thus, this became this. Because this was the mid-90s and Greenblatt lived across the ocean from the rest of the team, he would fax sketches of characters for the game and provide Pantone numbers for the colors since faxes were black and white. And these sketches helped shape the game's story. According to him, quote, "Some of my characters were better than what they were thinking, so they changed the story to adapt to what my characters were, which was great," unquote. An example he provided was one of the most beloved characters in the franchise, Chop Chop Master Onion. He was told to make a karate teacher, so when he sent the sketch of him being an onion man, the team loved it, so changed that part of the story for the newly pungent sensei. Greenblatt also credits his young daughters for helping shape the characters too, as he'd ask them what they thought of the illustrations. He claims they were quote-unquote very honest. PaRappa the Rapper doesn't have a story per se, not in the conventional sense anyways. Instead, the hip-hop hero is faced with challenges to his self-confidence from the showboating Joe Chin. To feel like he can live up to what Joe has and win the affections of the walking, talking flower girl Sunny Funny, PaRappa repeats his mantra of "I gotta believe" and goes through a journey of self-improvement. Learning to fight by taking karate lessons from an onion sensei, learning to drive and getting his license from an angry moose, learning business by getting a job from a sketchy frog at a flea market, and learning to cook by making seafood cake with guidance from a TV show star chicken. And later having to rap battle all of them to get to the front of the line to the bathroom because the seafood cake gave him diarrhea. And at the end of the game, PaRappa performs in a concert where he sums up what he learned in his journey. He's gotta believe. The plot is not absolute cinema with crazy plot twists or anything. It's just a dog teenager kid that wants to improve himself and learn from teachers. But every lesson in the game takes the form of that call and response rap system Matsuda devised. The difference between this game and Simon is that players can input extra notes and rhythm with the game to earn extra points, not requiring players to be 100% accurate. In the free play mode available after beating a stage, if PaRappa is freestyling well enough, the teacher disappears and players can freestyle to their heart's content as long as they stay on time with the beat. The next step, making finalized voiceover tracks to bring this offbeat story to life. The English language voice work for PaRappa the Rapper's final music and dialogue was not recorded in Japan, save for Watabe's characters. Instead, everything was recorded in New York. Even in the Japanese version of the game, PaRappa the Rapper's audio was in English, and every person to lend their voice to this game was a professional musician. There was no casting call or anything for this game. Instead, the cast was scouted by music producer and bassist Chris Parks, who called in people he had previously worked with or otherwise knew from the New York music scene. Parks would also serve as the audio engineer. Matsuda and Watabe flew out to the Big Apple and selected prospective cast members through this curated auditioning. PaRappa the Rapper and both other games in its series were non-union gigs and buyouts, meaning musicians were paid for their work and not given royalties or residuals. When it came to the recording process, the team had a general idea of what they wanted for characters, but were open to collaboration with the artists that came in to perform as far as personality or how certain lines were written and or delivered. Musicians in the booth would record individually, talking to the staff and working off Watabe's temp dialogue to make the final performance. So who were the musicians behind PaRappa the Rapper? Well, why not start off with the leading man, or dog if you will. Rapper Lucan D. Outdawsman, aka John Simpson III, and best known by his stage name Dread Fox, was the voice behind the hip-hop hero PaRappa the Rapper. Fox auditioned for the part via public payphone. He was given a description of the character and made his first pitch for a voice, changing the pitch and tweaking aspects of it as requested, and 2 weeks later found himself in the booth playing the lead role for this up-and-coming PlayStation game. Looking at PaRappa's friend group, R&B and jazz singer and one of soul musician Donny Hathaway's daughters, Kenya Hathaway, voiced PaRappa's love interest Sonny Funny. The late award-winning R&B, smooth jazz, and soul musician Armstead Christian voiced PaRappa's hungry friend PJ Barry and PaRappa's dad, Papa PaRappa. The late vocalist Michelle Burks, or Mickey as the team like to call her, voiced PaRappa's rockin' pal Katie Cat and TV star Cheep Cheep the Cooking Chicken. As for the rest of the voice cast, Rue Watabe played PaRappa's karate sensei Chop Chop Master Onion and the big-time show-off Joe Chin. In an interview with Amber Jones, Watabe stated bad kung fu movie dubs were the inspiration for his Master Onion voice. R&B and soul singer-songwriter Sandra Williams voiced Instructor Mussolini. Williams spoke to Mike Scholars for his excellent PaRappa the Rapper book and recounted her 6 or 7 hour experience recording Instructor Mussolini. Despite this being a one-off recording session that lasted only a few hours, she remembered it fondly and quote-unquote really enjoyed collaborating with the staff on bringing Mussolini to life. One aspect of the recording she recalls was, quote, those studio lights being dim, unquote, wanting to feel like she really was in a car, so PaRappa could show her if he could get far. She received somewhere between $250 and $350 for her time as this angry moose. The late reggae and dancehall musician Lanky Don played the laid-back frog merchant Prince Fleaswallow. And last, but certainly not least on the main voice cast, Richard Bush played the Rastafarian flea MC King Kong Mushi, as well as the bullies at the start of the game. I tried my best to look up Mr. Bush, but since that's such a common name, I only have guesses as to who this man is, although it's a safe bet he's a musician. Rodney Greenblatt can also be heard in the game, as he composed and performed the Jet Baby song heard in the opening cutscene. Even with the cast being full of English speakers, the game's script still has some distinctly Japanese elements, like PaRappa and his friends playing Jonken, which is like advanced rock, paper, scissors in Japan. Some of the grammar and wording can be wonky at times, but overall the script's English is fine. I suppose that's also partly helped by them working with native speakers. Then came launch day in Japan on December 6th, 1996, just over 2 years into the PlayStation's life. PaRappa the Rapper launched in Japan the same day as another Cartoon Animals game, Crash Bandicoot, which came out in America the year prior. To celebrate the launch of both games and move PlayStation consoles for the holiday season in Japan, the dog and Bandicoot teamed up and became besties in many TV and print advertisements. The characters were portrayed using mascot costumes and got up to all sorts of silly shenanigans. At first, PaRappa didn't move many copies. The first print run of the game was low because nobody from the dev team or Sony was sure if PaRappa would click with gamers. In its first month, the title only sold 35,000 units, but over the course of a few months, word of mouth helped it quickly crack 1 million units sold as of May 1998 and ultimately over 1.47 million units as of 2004. This surge in sales and popularity led to PaRappa being kind of a mascot for the PlayStation. In fact, Rodney Greenblatt pushed to make this dog to PlayStation what Super Mario was to Nintendo. The problem was that Greenblatt was one voice in a large corporation, and his division itself was just one small part of a larger machine. So ultimately, this never truly came to be. The game already having English audio and text available made this an easy title to introduce to American critics and be the subject of focus testing. Sony Computer Entertainment America gave editors at IGN a first look at this game shortly after it launched in Japan. The writer of the article giving first impressions of the game noted SCEA, quote, still didn't know what to do with it, unquote. This game was hard to define. There was no conventional term for it like action or RPG. IGN itself defined PaRappa the Rapper as a musical game. Even though it was hard to pin down how to describe the game in a single word, the IGN staff loved its catchy tunes, colorful visuals, funny story, and unique spin on Simon. PaRappa was not confirmed for an American release yet because Sony feared American gamers wouldn't have the same sunny response to the game that it received in its home country. According to an interview with Greenblatt, PaRappa's impressive sales figures in Japan led to SCEA giving the game a shot with American audiences. PaRappa made his formal American debut at the trade event E3 in 1997, the expo that year being held in the Georgia World Congress Center from June 19th through 21st. PlayStation had a hell of a lineup that year with a plethora of new games for existing IPs, such as Crash Bandicoot 2, Tomb Raider 2, Resident Evil 2, Final Fantasy VII, and the game that garnered the most attention, Metal Gear Solid. There were also a few fresh IPs on display, like Medieval, Blasto, and yes, PaRappa the Rapper. Not only was a demo of PaRappa showcased on the show floor, but there was also a PaRappa mascot walking around like the one from the Japanese advertisements. PaRappa may not have had the star power of Crash Bandicoot or technical impressiveness of Metal Gear Solid, but him being on display let American gamers know this canine was coming to their PlayStations very soon. The title would launch in Europe ahead of its North American release, dropping in Europe on September 26, 1997, and then in North America on November 17th that same year. For the franchise's international debut, the game saw a few tweaks, one of the most major changes being the box and disc art between regions. PAL regions kept the illustration of PaRappa, while North America went with a different illustration entirely, but both versions forewent the explosively colorful and busy look of the original cover. The title screen sees slight changes between releases, with all international versions removing PaRappa written in Japanese underneath the game's title and rearranging and/or adding to the copyright data. More differences are found in the loading screens, which feature some different font opacities and text across regions. International versions also removed the Japanese text option and added German, French, Italian, and Spanish. Post-edit Hal, real quick, forgot to put this in the script. There is an extra screen in the North American and PAL versions of the game that says Masaya Matsuda presents or produce, depending on the region. Kinda neat. PAL versions also received a different memory card icon. Furthermore, non-Japanese versions of the game have a bug fix in Stage 5's Cool Mode. Now PaRappa can actually continue walking to the bathroom. As far as changes only in the North American version, if the player messes up and PaRappa raps too awful, or if the player pauses only to find out pausing doesn't pause, it stops the game, the try again screen will continually play duck and horn sounds on loop in the Japanese and European versions. In North America, they made this less annoying by only having the sounds play twice, then stopping. Wow, covering North American changes in this game went by pretty quick. I sure hope it's this easy for the next two games. When it came to advertising, the TV ad campaign in the US for PaRappa consisted of people outside belting out the lyrics to some songs from the game, and it's very dorky in an endearing way.
Ribbit, ribbit, I cannot hold it, the last little toilet, already sold it, ribbit, ribbit.
The commercial then cuts to the actual version of the song with gameplay from the stage, and a narrator says,
PaRappa the Rapper, a great new music video game.
In the rain or in the snow.
Once you played it, you can't get it out of your head.
Print advertisements played it straight but failed to convey what players do in the game, instead leaning on the fact the game was huge in Japan and somehow involved rap music. In the UK around the holiday season, Sony published newspaper adverts trying to push PaRappa as the next big thing, citing the Japanese success, how 40% of the player base was female, and the bevy of character goods in the series' home country. The advert also claimed PaRappa was expected to be the quote-unquote best-selling game of all time come Christmas. That's a reach even for 1997. Sony also held a competition where entrants could win a copy of the game if they could answer this question: what is PaRappa's girlfriend called? On the note of quizzes, PaRappa had a similar contest in the States, according to archives of its website. However, information seems to be lost to time, although a fair guess at the prize would be a free copy of the game. Famously, PaRappa the Rapper was on some PlayStation demo CDs. One such case is in an issue of PlayStation Underground, the official CD magazine of PlayStation. Yes, the magazine was literally on CDs.
Nuts. Got him!
PaRappa's demo was of Stage 1, but the game only lets you retry or quit upon completing it. PaRappa the Rapper was also showcased in the February 1998 edition of PlayStation Underground. This is noteworthy not just because there is a download for a save with all the levels at a cool rating, but because this was a crossover promotion with Mystery Science Theater 3000. The magazine gave the Satellite of Love crew PlayStation games a try, with Mike Nelson playing NHL Face-Off 98, Crow T Robot playing Crash Bandicoot, and Tom Servo playing, what else, PaRappa the Rapper.
Face it, Bob, you'll never master the subtle power of PaRappa the Rapper.
Or the lightning-fast reflexes of Crash Bandicoot.
Well, don't get cocky. It's going to get rocky. We're going to head into the theater now.
The crew would reference the game the following year on the actual show in Season 9, Episode 11, Devilfish.
Kick, punch, it's all in the mind.
Overall, Rodney Greenblatt thought SCEA, quote, did a pretty good job, unquote, advertising the game in the US as far as the diversity of places it wound up, but believed they missed the mark on the demographic to which they were appealing. Quote, they were marketing it to little kids and I knew that wasn't going to be good, because it was a little too hard for little kids. Our audience in Japan was made up of teenagers and college kids, but here in the US it was little kids, which was a mistake, unquote. But one of the best ways for a game to generate buzz outside of ad campaigns is reviews, and critics loved PaRappa the Rapper. The game currently has an outstanding 92 on Metacritic. So many outlets gave this unique title 9s and 10s, loving the game's charming visuals, catchy music, funny story, and innovative concept. There was simply nothing like it on the PlayStation or really any console at the time. The biggest criticisms of the game in both the East and West were that it was too easy and too quick to beat. I mean, Audino on Game Center CX beat the game in only 4.5 hours, which at the time was the second fastest clear time in the show. At only 6 stages and then of course replaying it to get the cool mode clear, the game will only last for a few hours. As of now, HowLongToBeat.com has PaRappa at 1.5 hours for the main story and 4.5 hours for completionist, which means doing everything the game has to offer. However, what it lacks in runtime, it makes up for in the uniqueness oozing from every corner of the game. This was something special, something that was worth experiencing, and it was only on PlayStation. PaRappa did something else too. In a world where violence in video games was a growing concern, PaRappa the Rapper stood out to the many who criticized the industry by being a non-violent game. The worst the quote-unquote violence gets is PaRappa imagining beating up the bullies from the start of the game in a cartoonish puff of smoke. Otherwise, PaRappa himself is just going through everyday life trying to better himself and win the affections of Sunny Funny by learning karate, getting his driver's license, and making seafood cake. There is no big bad, there is no fighting, there are no weapons, and the fact Sony was pushing such a non-violent game could be seen as a win. With all the advertising, glowing praise from video game critics and critics of the industry, fame through demo discs, and major sales numbers in Japan, was PaRappa destined for PlayStation greatness abroad too? Yikes. According to sales data from 2003, in North America, PaRappa didn't even crack 250,000 units sold. The person that dug up these numbers was unsure how reliable they are, but judging by the fact PaRappa never got a greatest hits release, a discounted re-release after hitting 150k units sold and on the market for a year, I think it's safe to say this game did not sell anywhere near the million plus units it sold in Japan. The only source I could find on European sales is VG charts listing roughly 160,000 copies. But take that with a grain of salt. So, what happened? For one, Sony didn't know how to advertise something like PaRappa the Rapper, let alone the audience for whom it was meant. And two, more importantly, the game was up against other big PlayStation titles around the same time. Notably JRPG Final Fantasy VII a couple months prior, action platformer Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back less than 2 weeks prior, and action-adventure game Tomb Raider 2 a few days after PaRappa's release. An unproven IP with a genre that wasn't even named yet was not going to outsell 3 established IPs with highly anticipated entries, all 3 of which ended up selling well over 1 million copies. While PaRappa failed to generate the same level of sales as in the East, PaRappa's unexpected success in Japan led to the game's vocal talent getting a bonus. Mussolini performer Sandra Williams shared with Mike Scholars that she received a phone call from Sony a few months after PaRappa's Japanese launch and was offered an additional $5,000 or $7,000 on top of the original $4,000 she was initially paid. The problem was, if you recall, she wasn't paid $4,000. She only got a few $100. The producer intermediary took most of the original money undetected, leaving Williams with a fraction of what she should have been paid. Williams still got that bonus paycheck in full, but the initial money was gone. It's unknown if this happened to any other performers on the cast. As crappy as that is, Williams didn't share that part of her experience with ill intent. She just wanted to get the full story out there, warts and all. In fact, her experience with PaRappa was overall positive. In addition to the extra money, she also got a free copy of the game, which she watched her son play with his friends. She was also treated quote-unquote like a celebrity at a GameStop one of her friends operated. And soon after his debut in the gaming scene providing vocals for a game about a rapping dog, DreadFox found himself providing vocals for a game about a blue hedgehog competing with Sony's PlayStation. Yep, DreadFox can be heard in Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast performing vocals for Knuckles the Echidna's theme Unknown from ME, with Marlon Saunders performing the rap, although Fox's name was misspelled in the credits, which is the second time we've discussed someone having their name misspelled in the Sonic Adventure credits. Something if I had a nickel. Good for Fox getting his name out there. I sure hope he doesn't do anything to ruin his reputation in the future. Going beyond the impact this game had on its voice cast finding success soon after release, PaRappa the Rapper also influenced other Western media. More specifically, it inspired the style of a character in the 90s cartoon Courage the Cowardly Dog, in one of its most famous episodes in fact. Series creator John Dilworth confirmed that in the episode King Ramses' Curse, King Ramses' animation was inspired by PaRappa the Rapper's 2D characters in a 3D space animation style. Now, you might be expecting me to bring up The Simpsons. For God's sake, I've gone this entire video without mentioning Poochie, the lowest of the low-hanging fruits for a Simpsons reference regarding PaRappa. For those unfamiliar with the episode The Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie Show, the whole premise is that the in-universe Tom and Jerry parody, Itchy and Scratchy, added a hip new character to their lineup to boost ratings. Poochie the rockin' dog and rappin' surfer, you're the fool he pities.
Hey kids, always recycle. To the extreme! Busted!
The episode premiered on February 9th, 1997, 2 months after PaRappa launched in Japan. But Poochie being a cool rapping dog is a total coincidence. I think if Poochie was inspired by PaRappa, someone on the staff would have said something by now. Odds are the decision of Poochie's design was made prior to the PlayStation Pup's debut on a disc. So, anyways, I got that all out of my system, back to yakking about PaRappa.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
PaRappa the Rapper's notoriety paved the way for a new kind of game, the rhythm game. About a year after Sony's paper-thin dog made his video game debut, Konami released their own rhythm game in Japanese arcades, Beatmania. Neither Konami nor anyone else involved with the game has specified PaRappa the Rapper as being an inspiration for Beatmania, or Beatmani if you're a nerd. Whether it is or isn't a coincidence, PaRappa helped make the foundation for this new genre. But there is a notable difference between PaRappa and 99% of rhythm games to follow it. In an average rhythm game, the goal is to get a 100% ranking by hitting all the notes in time. But in PaRappa, players are allowed to go off the chart and freestyle to the beat and score extra points. In fact, that's the way PaRappa is supposed to be played. Matsuda over the years has expressed disappointment in this match-the-chart direction for rhythm games, but his PlayStation series didn't end with one game of course, meaning there was still time for PaRappa to leave an even bigger impact on this budding genre. So then what did PaRappa do next? Despite being teased at the end of the first game, Matsuda did not want to make PaRappa 2. Instead, he wanted to use a brand new character and different genre of music as he believed rap music would be just a fad. Rodney Greenblatt opposed this and suggested the team strike while the iron was hot with another PaRappa game, but rolled with the decision to move on to a new character and music genre since he trusted Matsuda's decision making. This new not PaRappa game would be called Jammer Lammy. Actually, it's Jammer. Both are valid. Yes, some people say Jammer Lammy, but many on the team and even the game itself says Jammer Lammy, so it's what I go with. Anyways, this new title would still be set in the PaRappa universe but star a shy sheep named, wait for it, Lammy. And instead of being a rapper, she would be a guitarist for a band named Milk Can alongside PaRappa's friend Katy Cat and a new mouse character named Masan. That all said, the game would focus on rock and roll music. Come the development of Jammer Lammy, international collaboration was made a bit easier with the increasing usage of the internet. Instead of Greenblatt faxing over his paint by Pantone numbers illustrations from New York, he just threw designs on a server for the rest of the team to access over in Japan. Otherwise, the process of bringing characters to life was mostly the same as PaRappa the Rapper, but getting from concept to final design for Lammy herself was not as easy as it was for PaRappa the character. Greenblatt himself said Lammy was by far the hardest character to design. Greenblatt pitched the idea of making Lammy gothic, citing The Cure as an inspiration, but that never came to be. He drafted a few Lammy designs, and the team went with this pink sheep with a football-shaped head, a design that stuck for a huge chunk of development. This design was kept for so long that it could be seen in early versions of the cutscene animations that use Rue Watabe's temp dialogue. The team decided later on to scrap the design completely and make a new design inspired by Australian-British singer-songwriter Natalie Imbruglia, a decision that put the game behind schedule a bit. It's worth noting every teacher in those early cutscenes have designs that are either close or identical to how they would look in the final game. That's how late Lammy's design change was. So this...
I guess I have no choice now. Leave it to Lammy!
became this.
That's right! My guitar's in my mind! Leave it to
Greenblatt was a bit disappointed at first that Lammy's design strayed so far from his original vision, but in retrospect believes Matsuura made the right call to make Lammy look even more like a rock star. Development on PaRappa the Rapper was easygoing and everyone was just having fun making a little PlayStation project. Jammer Lammy had a bigger team and a bigger budget, but with those also came bigger expectations from Sony. The pressure was on to make a second blockbuster, so the team went all out to one-up PaRappa and push what the PlayStation could do. In the process, though, Greenblatt recounted the fun of developing the original game was dying out when making UJL. The game was unveiled in January of 1999 in Weekly Famitsu, with American gaming news outlets romanizing the name as Unjamirami. Later that month, SCEA confirmed the game would launch stateside that same year with the title Jamirami. At its core, UJL is a lot like PaRappa with its Simon call-and-response rhythm system, but of course it's re-themed to be rock and roll. Instead of Lammy repeating after a teacher verbally, she plays her guitar in response, guitar in air quotes because her guitar is in her mind for most of the game. She could still freestyle to get more points if the inputs match the rhythm of the song. Additionally, players can unlock different guitar effects as the story progresses. Oh, and the game is compatible with the DualShock controller, which came out in between PaRappa and Lammy. But that's about where the similarities end and differences begin. PaRappa the Rapper may have been a kooky little game that didn't have much in the way of plot, but Jammer Lammy put what PaRappa set down and went bonkers with it. After a dream of the now homeless Chop Chop Master Onion being Milk Can's new vocalist and performing a prophetic song that foreshadows the entire game, Lammy woke up and realized she had 15 minutes to get to her concert. The thing is, everything on Rodney Greenblatt's Green Earth was getting in her way, from a fire in a building with a pizzeria to being roped into putting a bunch of baby bunnies to sleep. Because you know what they say, rabbits multiply quickly. She always got through it with Chop Chop Master Onion's mantra, Dojo, Casino, it's all in the mind. And with her guitar in her mind, she always exclaimed her catchphrase of leave it to Lammy and took care of her obstacles, all in the course of 15 minutes. So, who was going to bring this story a voice this time? Once again, the game is full of New York-based musicians plus Rue Watabe having recorded in Japan. Chris Parks reprised his role as talent coordinator and reached out to musician contacts to work on this game, which leads us to the list of who played these goofy paper characters. Starting with the titular Natalie Imbruglia persona, Lammy was played by Sara Ramirez. Yes, that Sara Ramirez. Lammy was one of their first roles in entertainment and their very first role in voiceover. Michelle Mickey Burks reprised her role as Katie Cat. As noted, Rue Watabe also returned, reprising Chop Chop Master Onion and Joe Chin and playing the gibberish-speaking Masan and pilot Captain Fusenpepper. The mysterious Richard Bush returned to voice the two goofball bullies from PaRappa the Rapper and take on the new role of firefighting Dalmatian Chief Puddle. Despite not being the star, PaRappa appears in this game as a bonus, once again played by Dread Fox. He was accompanied by Armstead Christian reprising PJ Barry. Musical theater actor and music teacher Louise Marie Meunier, a.k.a. Lulu, played the vomiting caterpillar nurse Kathy Pillar, and jazz musician Kemba Francis played the singing rabbit baby. Yes, I know many of you are raging at the lot of this stage. Grammy-nominated funk, rock, and hip-hop musician and current member of Bon Jovi, Everett Bradley, played the wood-carving beaver Paul Chuck. In his interview with Amber Jones, he recalled the process of recording for the character. Bradley looked at the visual of this angry beaver and thought of how that character would sound with teeth like that. He came up with a silly voice and everyone there at the session started laughing. Thus, we have one of the funniest parts of his career. And this wouldn't be Bradley's only time working on properties with talking animals, as 2 years later he would perform the vocals for music involving Shadow the Hedgehog in Sonic Adventure 2. Grammy-nominated jazz vocalist Carla Cook performed as the idol in hell Teriyaki Yoko. And lastly, singer-songwriter Kiva Hargrove played Rami, aka Urami in the Japanese version, which is Japanese wordplay. Jammer Lammy built upon criticisms of PaRappa. One is extra content. Yes, players can still replay the older stages and go for a high score and or achieve cool mode, but they can also play as Lammy in co-op or versus mode with or against Rami, either with the CPU or a real-life person. Furthermore, as mentioned, PaRappa is a bonus character, unlocked after beating the game. He comes complete with hip-hop remixes of the songs in the game and different cutscenes. He's also selectable in a 2-player mode with or against Lammy. Also, PaRappa sounds like he's rapping through a Wii remote speaker. Go figure. The only stage that can't be played in any 2-player mode or by PaRappa solo is Stage 1. Joe Chin explains in the instruction manual that Stage 1 is only for Lammy since it was her dream, and that the stage should be treated as a practice stage. Despite this, there is data on the disc for a PaRappa version of Stage 1. It's the same instrumental, but PaRappa raps along to it. The audio is complete even with PaRappa's low-quality rap vocals, but the entire rhythm chart uses only the triangle button and none of the camera angles or animations are programmed. This stage would be playable at a later point, but we'll get to that later. The second response to global player criticism of PaRappa is that Lammy is way harder. The game's charts are far more demanding than the comparatively easygoing PaRappa the Rapper, so the franchise went from one extreme to the other. But if the player is a wiener, there is also an easy mode different from PaRappa the Rapper's where any button can be pressed in time with the rhythm chart. Lammy's game launched in Japan on March 18th, 1999. Just like PaRappa, the game had English text available in the Japanese version, which meant American fans and critics that were eager to give it a spin could import the game and be able to understand it. Soon after its launch in Japan, Sony put UJL on display during E3 1999 at the Los Angeles Convention Center from May 13th through 15th. A playable demo of Jammer Lammy was on the show floor alongside Spyro 2, Crash Team Racing, and Ape Escape. What's more, UJL won 2 Best of E3 Game Critics Awards, Outstanding Achievement in Sound alongside Outcast on PC, and Best Puzzle/Trivia/Parlor Game with Austin Powers Operation Trivia on PC being a runner-up. Yeah, rhythm game or music game wasn't exactly a household term yet. Still, Sony in America was still pushing PaRappa as an icon of the platform. A giant inflatable PaRappa could be seen on the show floor alongside giant versions of Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, Sweet Tooth, and Lara Croft. Not long after Lammy's award-winning showing at E3, Sony sent out postcards confirming the American release date of the game, August 17th, 1999. One would think Jammer Lammy would be easy to bring to the States, right? I mean, it already has audio and text in English, but bringing the game stateside was not that simple. Sure, there's stuff like the game needing a brand new logo that went through a few color changes across prototypes, as well as brand new box and disc art, but this game's content had major alterations for its North American release. Late into this game's story, Lammy slips and slides on a banana peel, dies, and goes to hell. If you're an American and have played this game, don't worry, this isn't the Mandela effect. SCEA made the extremely last-minute decision to have that part completely rewritten and reanimated for American audiences, reportedly to keep that E for Everyone rating from the ESRB. This is before E10+ existed. The game staff needed to quickly make a brand new scenario and cutscenes to make this work for the American market. So, in the US release of Jammer Lammy, instead of leaving the shop and slipping on the peel, Lammy gets her belt caught on the shop door's handle, is yeeted into the sky, rewinds time and lands on an island hosting a stage show. Lammy also gets a brand new look for the stage in the US version. In both versions, if Lammy plays right, then Teriyaki Yoko will get Lammy to her concert. Just one scenario is more gruesome than the other. But the changes that needed to be made for this scenario don't stop here. Many religious references in Yoko's song were changed to things like somebody, a friend, or a man, although apparently Angel was okay to keep. Also, remember when I said Stage 1 has Chop Chop Master Onion foreshadow the entire game? Yeah, that includes Lammy going to hell. So the line, "you can play in hell," was changed to "you can play on an island." Also, because Lammy has a new look after her experience on the island, the cutscene before the band meets up had to be changed too. The American version adds more intrigue too as to what Katie Cat and Ma-san got up to on their journeys. Lastly, Rammy's line after losing in Versus mode in Stage 7 was changed from her going back to hell to her going home. Religious terminology and imagery were not the only things changed for Lammy's North American debut. Stage 5, where Lammy and Paul Chuck carve a guitar out of a tree, had some altered lyrics so the song sounds less like it's glorifying deforestation. Jammer Lammy came out in Europe on September 10th, 1999 with the Japanese content intact, including Lammy dying. There were a few other minor changes in both the North American and European versions though, like Stage 7 having graphical tweaks for symmetry and changing guitarist on stage to performer on stage when hitting cool mode in Stage 7. The North American version also removed the text language toggle entirely, while Europe removed Japanese and added Italian, German, Spanish, and French. There are two huge changes for the international releases that stand above the rest though. The first is changing the song used in the credits from an instrumental version of Keep Your Head Up to a rock version of the song with lyrics, and the second is a mode exclusive to international UJL, a special sound player mode unlocked after clearing all stages in all modes. This change even necessitated rearranging the title screen. Talk about snazzy. Advertising Jammer Lammy to Americans was, in many ways, different from advertising PaRappa the Rapper. Before we get into the more extravagant side of it, let's talk print and TV adverts. I couldn't find any ads for Europe, but the American ad campaigns, Remember when Greenblatt said Sony aimed at too young of an audience for PaRappa the Rapper? Well, take a look at what Sony did for Jammer Lammy. What you see here is a US magazine advert for the game, featuring a woman with a short Lammy shirt with an exposed midriff and text around her belly button. This art was also used for postcards. Neither Matsuda nor Greenblatt were happy with this ad campaign. Matsuda called it quote-unquote too sexy, and Greenblatt opined SCEA quote-unquote overshot the target demographic. Quote, Sony told us we couldn't have the hell part of the game for the US market, and then they bring out these ads, which totally flaunt, well, you know, they're just torturing us, unquote. What about TV advertisements? Surely those would better depict the game.
There's a new rock star in town.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, advertising on TV and in print for this game abroad was kind of a mess. But Sony went beyond just TV and print adverts. They also advertised the game by putting on a whole ass concert. I'm talking live music with live performers on stage. The Jammer Lammy concert was held in New York City at a now closed nightclub in Manhattan called the Roxy on August 26, 1999, just over a week after Lammy's American release. The audience consisted of members of the media, Sony PR employees, people that worked on the game, and a few randos lucky enough to get in. The concert kicked off with an intro from SCEA's then Executive Vice President Chief Operations Officer Kazuo Kaz Hirai, but some of you may know him better as the Ridge Racer guy. The concert's band consisted of Masaya Matsuda himself, Shige Kawagoe, Naoto Sugai, PaRappa talent coordinator Chris Parks, and Yoshihisa Suzuki. The singers there were names you all know by this point: Michelle Mickey Burks, Rue Watabe, Everett Bradley, and Dread Fox. Sara Ramirez, Kiva Hargrove, Kemba Francis, and Carla Cook were also in attendance, but did not perform until later in the concert for the Baby Parade song. Rodney Greenblatt was there too, and recalls the concert being quote-unquote amazing. And there was an intermission. This nameless MC showed up to host this part of the concert and just, This guy made a lot of off-putting jokes and comments and was kinda cringy overall. Definitely killed the vibe in my opinion. Anyways, the intermission was a quick 2-player versus round with 2 members of the audience. The first competitor was Jeff Gerstmann, a gaming journalist who at the time was working for videogames.com. This Lammy concert happened just a little over a week before he appeared on TV for the infamous live demo of the Sega Dreamcast on Good Morning America. The second contestant would be Greg Off, another journalist who at the time was working for PS Extreme. Except at first, some guy named Gideon thought he was called up and was awkwardly dismissed from the stage. Once Off was on stage, Gerstmann and Off faced off in a multiplayer round of Jammer Lammy on the airplane stage. Gerstmann won the round and was gifted a Lammy-themed $300 Fernandez Z03 travel guitar, aka a Fernandez Nomad, while Off won a talking, moving Lammy doll. The guitar and doll are cool prizes, but neither were one of a kind. The guitar was distributed in other contests like in magazines and given to members of the gaming press as a promo item. Gerstmann got not only a Lammy guitar from the concert, but an identical one after returning home. Off also received one during his time with PS Extreme, but sold it on eBay in 2004, which as of now is owned by Danny Gerdude of BunnyEars.com. The Jamming Lammy doll, as it's called, was only released in Japan. Doll Lammy strums her guitar and plays songs from the game, as well as saying her catchphrase and a few other phrases. All in all, this was a neat promotional event. A write-up from IGN's Douglas Perry noted the concert was fantastic, but didn't have as high of an attendance as he expected. But that's not it for SCEA spending millions on advertising this PaRappa spin-off. Lammy was part of a $150 million winter PlayStation ad campaign on kids' TV blocks. The game's campaign being the Super Slammin' Tunestakes on Kids WB. During the Kids WB Saturday morning cartoon block from December 14th, 1999 to January 1st, 2000, viewers would keep an ear out for an audio cue of a band rocking out, and then write on a postcard addressed to the sweepstakes what show they were watching when the sound played. One grand prize winner could bag a sick PlayStation gaming package, which included a 47-inch big screen TV, PlayStation console, and a copy of Jammer Lammy. 20 entrants could win a copy of the game and some Kids WB swag, and 80 other entrants could just win a copy of the game. The other ad campaigns part of this multi-million-dollar ad run were Spyro Ripto's Rage on Fox Kids and Ape Escape on Cartoon Network's Toonami block. And lastly, Jammer Lammy had some merch too. The instruction manual lists baseball t-shirts and signature shirts available for purchase by phoning a listed number or going to PlayStation's website. Merch and promo events are great, but again, another great way to generate buzz is reviews. Did Lammy live up to PaRappa's praise? Well, critical reception of Jammer Lammy was positive, but not as positive as PaRappa. UJL has no Metascore, but on the old Game Rankings archives, it had an 82.68%. The game's additional features like 2-player co-op and versus modes and post-game PaRappa went over well, but the story had a mixed reception compared to its predecessor, with people either loving it or not finding it as charming as PaRappa's, and its higher difficulty was not reviewed very highly. There were also criticisms of UJL not innovating enough over PaRappa the Rapper, which is fair given the game can be cleared pretty quickly. Despite the money spent on advertising to Americans and relatively positive reception by critics, Jammer Lammy sold just shy of 100,000 copies in North America, far fewer than the meh sales figures of PaRappa the Rapper outside Japan. In fact, Lammy didn't even sell that well in Japan, making this game a global commercial failure. Additionally, 1999 was a huge year for video games, and Lammy was not going to win in sales against other big titles at the time. Plus, gamers were pumped for the next generation of hardware. The Dreamcast was set to launch in North America and Europe soon after Lammy's debut in those regions. Greenblatt believed the team took too long to finish Jammer Lammy and should have just made a new PaRappa title instead. Even with its commercial failure, Jammer Lammy furthered its critical success by winning an Interactive Achievement Award in 2000 for Outstanding Achievement in Original Music Composition. Lammy won the award over nominated games Outcast and Silver. Hey, it's something. The thing is, Sony still had bigger plans for PaRappa and Friends in the States. Columbus, Ohio toy company Resource was set to release both imported and new PaRappa merchandise to American consumers. However, former Resource toy designer Steve Miller noted the PaRappa toys never made it past the drawing stage. Quote, "The PaRappa toy line was going to be smaller and not articulated. It was viewed as a niche brand for sale at Suncoast and MediaPlay type stores." Unquote. The company ultimately folded in 2001. In Japan, PaRappa continued to get other media. Japanese fans got an English and Japanese bilingual book in April of 2000 called the Rodney Fun Comic Collection, a compilation of comics of PaRappa and friends and a separate character named Square E. Bear, illustrated by Rodney Greenblatt with speech bubbles being in English and notes at the bottom having a Japanese translation. Japan also got some exclusive PaRappa albums performed by the original American artists that played the beloved flat characters. A single version of Got to Move from the final level of Jammer Lammy was released on April 21st, 1999, which is cool, but Milk Can got a full album release on June 19th that same year. The fictional rock band played covers of songs from Jammer Lammy stages, miscellaneous songs like Casino and My Hair, and even some original tunes. And lastly, PaRappa and PJ Barry got their own album on September 22nd, 1999, which featured many remixes of sampled Jammer Lammy songs. And yes, you can actually hear PaRappa rap on this album. And while this one is not only about PaRappa, Rodney Greenblatt had a themed cafe in Japan from 1999 to March of 2002. But the biggest piece of extra PaRappa media released in Japan before 2001 was Jammer Lammy Now, an arcade version of Jammer Lammy made in collaboration with Namco. At the time, Namco was trying to challenge Konami's rhythm games in the arcade scene. One of Konami's hit rhythm games was Guitar Freaks, which used a plastic guitar to match notes on the display. And with Namco wanting to do something similar, porting UJL was a perfect opportunity to tap into that market. Namco was also developing and releasing 3 similar games around the same time, the quartet being known as the 4 Guitar Brothers. The arcade version of UJL was announced in September of 1999 and hit arcades that December. UJLNOW still had the songs players knew and loved from the PlayStation game, now reorganized into 3 difficulty categories and void of any story cutscenes, but instead of using a PlayStation controller, players used a plastic guitar controller, guitar table, to match inputs with the on-screen rhythm map. Just like the original game, UJLNOW only has English audio as well as an option for English text. But this isn't just a port of UJL. This game is full of content not found in the PlayStation game. For instance, remember how UJL had audio for a PaRappa version of Stage 1 with incomplete assets? Well, that stage is fully functioning in UJLNOW, with finished animations and a proper rhythm chart. Rami is playable on this stage in multiplayer too, which was also unavailable in the PlayStation game. The new content isn't just gameplay stuff. The game has a boatload of new cutscenes and dialogue, and the English voice cast returned to play characters in them. The game was hosted by the love-to-hate-to-love showboating dog Joe Chin, who is heard throughout the game from the attract mode to the menus to even the game over countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 2.5. Beautifully excellentos, and thank you to the very next degree.
UJLNOW also has interview segments of the members of Milk Can, most of which had never been seen outside of the game before. This is a really cool piece of PaRappa history, but Jammer Lammy Now was not long for the arcade scene. It's evident the game performed poorly in its location tests and was pulled from Japanese arcades only a few months after launching. But wait, if this game was pulled so quickly, how do we know so much about it? To make a long story short, this game was lost media for decades, with the only media available related to the game being some short videos and low-quality screenshots. The PaRappa fandom and curious members of the lost media community in general looked for an arcade cabinet of UJLNOW, or at least data from or about it to no avail. There was even a dedicated Discord server to document findings. The best thing that was dug up was a manual for the game's cabinet shared in 2019. But that same year, there was an even bigger breakthrough. A working arcade cabinet was known to exist, and it was owned by Jonathan Ross. Unit E Technologies founder Eric Yaki contacted Ross, and Ross agreed to meet up. It was great the UK superstar wanted to make this happen, but 2019 turned to 2020 and, But Yaki and Ross finally met up in 2023 and jammed together. Thanks to this collaboration and the work of Phil Bennett, there is a full dump of the game online. If you want further details on this game and cabinet, and the story of meeting Jonathan Ross, check out Yaki's video about Jammer Lammy Now. link is on screen and in the description. His channel also has cutscenes and gameplay of UJLNOW. In between Jammer Lammy and the next PaRappa the Rapper title, Masaya Matsuda headed 2 more rhythm games not related to the franchise. The once Mercedes-Benz car-branded Vib-Ribbon on the PlayStation, and the diagonally slanted funky astronaut adventure Rhyme Rider Kerorikan on the WonderSwan Color, a Japan-only handheld by Bandai. Of course, Rhyme Rider Kerorikan never made it anywhere outside Japan, but Vib-Ribbon was released in Europe on August 30th, 2000. The game wouldn't see an American release until it was sold on the PlayStation Store as a PS1 classic in 2014. The whole idea of the game was that unlike PaRappa and Lammy, which only focused on one music genre or umbrella of genres, players could have a rhythm game based on any genre they wanted, from pop music to Mongolian throat singing. All they had to do was put in an audio CD and they could play a game with a rhythm map modeled after songs on whatever CD they put in. It came with 6 preloaded songs, but after that, the game's replay value was virtually limitless. Vib-Ribbon didn't really see success the same way PaRappa the Rapper did, and I think Matsuda's words about this in an interview with Edge can be applied to the lukewarm success of PaRappa internationally and Jammer Lammy globally. Quote, Vib-Ribbon was never really a big hit in Japan, but I wonder if that really matters. This culture of always feeling the need to make huge successes in the video game industry reminds me of the music industry in the 80s and 90s. I feel that mindset can be dangerous. Back then, many of my colleagues in the music industry would say that we needed to support smaller artists who were able to sell records in the tens of thousands range. But in reality, that didn't happen. All of the focus went on the blockbuster artists. So in that sense, I think Vib-Ribbon was received in a very healthy fashion, unquote. Even with lackluster sales, Vib-Ribbon saw 2 sequels, neither leaving their home country of Japan. It wouldn't be long before Matsuda, Nana Onsha, and Rodney Greenblatt would team up again for another PaRappa game, this one being a proper sequel. Yes, Greenblatt got his wish to return to their favorite hound, and PaRappa the Rapper 2 was formally announced in 2001 and set to launch that same year in Japan on the PlayStation 2. Before PaRappa's new game debuted, he was set to debut in his very own TV anime. Yep, from April 14th, 2001 to January 11th, 2002, PaRappa had a 30-episode anime on Fuji TV produced by JC Staff in cooperation with Production IG. I mean, PaRappa is such a whimsical world with wacky antics and incredibly creative minds behind it. The potential for a PaRappa anime is practically boundless. Well, about that. This anime was made to appeal to a younger demographic and sell toys, hence why PaRappa and his friends are school children and not implied to be more teenagers age for this animated outing. The anime is good and fun if you're a fan of PaRappa or just want a lighthearted romp, but this doesn't quite reach the levels of sheer zaniness seen in the games. And part of that is because almost nobody on the game's team worked on this anime. One of the only people from the game to do so was Rodney Greenblatt, who really only worked on it in air quotes because all he did was design characters, and there were plenty introduced throughout the show's run. And him not being on the team wasn't for a lack of trying. Greenblatt did request to work on the show because he'd always wanted to work in animation and see his characters come to life on TV. Greenblatt even hired a professional translator so he could talk to the head honcho of the company and make his case for being on the staff for the PaRappa anime. But the producers deliberately chose not to cross the streams when it came to people from the games working on the show, barring Greenblatt designing characters and one other person being involved. This anime was the first time a PaRappa project mainly used Japanese language audio instead of English. Instead of mostly New York music talent, the voice cast had some notable voice actors, like Miyu Irino playing PaRappa, which was one of his very first voiceover roles. A few months after PaRappa debuted on TV, Irino would have an even bigger break as the voice of Haku in Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. Voices were across the board when it came to matching the vibe of their English language counterparts, but the best one by far is Chop Chop Master Onion. Listen to this.
Punch, it's all in the mind. If you wanna test me, I'm sure you'll find the things I'll teach ya. Sure to beat ya. Nevertheless, you'll get a lesson from teacher. その間、お前たち古市道場の掃除頼む。パンチ、クイック、チョープ。頼む。
That sounds a lot like Ru Watabe, right? Well, that's because it is Ru Watabe. Yep, Watabe is the other person from the game's team to be on this show, even if Chop Chop Master Onion's appearance is brief. It's bad enough PaRappa the animated rapper was being held back creatively, but what made things worse was that the show was an utter flop. PaRappa the Rapper aired on Saturday mornings in a primetime slot for children's TV, but not only were kids not digging it, episodes kept getting preempted by baseball games. Okay, but what if they made an English dub? Surely dubbing the show into the language PaRappa speaks in the source material and releasing it to English-speaking countries would be in Sony's interest, right? They already had one of the original cast members too. Well, Greenblatt pushed again and again and again and again for Sony to produce an English dub, making the argument it'd be easy to make it an alternate language track on DVD and wouldn't need additional animation. But Sony executives were only ever interested in releasing the show in Japan. To this day, it's the only country where the anime has officially seen a release. The show is available with English fan subs, and there's an interesting story behind Western fans preventing this anime from becoming lost media. Check out this video for details on that story. PaRappa is such an amazing and dedicated fanbase. During the PaRappa anime's time on the air, the hip-hop hero found himself part of a McDonald's Happy Meal promo in Japan, or a Happy Set as it's called there. Sony partnered with McDonald's to distribute toys of Toro from Doko Demo Isho, a monkey from Ape Escape, a chocobo from Final Fantasy, and PaRappa, a campaign which lasted from July 19th to August 14th, 2001. Not only was Mickey D's in Japan getting these toys, but also a special PlayStation 2 demo disc called the McDonald's Original Happy Disc. The DVD contained a special McDonald's video and game demos for PaRappa the Rapper 2 and Ape Escape 2001. This demo would be the world's first taste of PaRappa 2, and a taste it was because the disc contains the majority of the first level where PaRappa works inside a Beard Burger, an in-universe fast food restaurant. Except the Beard Burger branding was completely changed to McDonald's. Japanese fans could have the full meal and then some on August 30th, 2001 when PaRappa the Rapper 2 hit store shelves. There was also a PaRappa the Rapper Party Mix CD made to promote the game. The CD had 28 songs, some from the game, some from famous artists like Coolio. No, really? PaRappa 2 had improvements and quality of life changes from prior entries. For one, the game is harder than PaRappa 1, but not as hard as Jammer Lammy. Furthermore, there is now a training level before a level starts, or as the devs call it, the Rodney level, named after Rodney Greenblatt because he was having trouble with the levels in Lammy. It gives players a chance to practice some of the upcoming levels patterns ahead of time. PaRappa 2 also has additional replay value. It's not as much as Jammer Lammy in so much that the game doesn't have rock and roll remixes of the songs where you play as Lammy, but there are new difficulty levels signified by the color of PaRappa's hat. The game being on the PS2 has other natural perks like higher audio fidelity and wackier, higher quality animation that doesn't use compressed pre-rendered cutscenes to come to life. However, the game is also notably duller in terms of its colors. Yeah, the characters still have that classic general look, and all the newcomers have Rodney Greenblatt's signature style, but the bright colors of the first two games were replaced by more subdued colors with shadowing and detailing that toned down the visual pop of prior entries. Regardless, PaRappa and pals were back for another wacky outing. PaRappa in this game is insecure about how mature he is and wants to prove he's grown up enough for the love of his life. But unlike prior entries, this game also has a more conventional story in the most PaRappa way possible. Someone is turning all the food in PaRappa Town into noodles. It's up to PaRappa, his friends, and a friggin' army led by Sunny Funny's dad to fight back against this noodleization of civilization. PaRappa's gotta believe in himself and rap his way through 8 stages. PaRappa 2's soundtrack is mostly inspired by R&B. While the first game's soundtrack is iconic and Jammer Lammy's soundtrack has good variety, I think PaRappa 2 has the best instrumentals in the series. Don't believe me? Well, this song playing didn't come from Epidemic Sound.
Extra, extra, read all about it. The best burgers in town from all around. People from around the world come and get it. The line goes around like a merry-go-round.
It may not be talked about or quoted as much as the first game's soundtrack, but this game's OST goes hard. Once again, bringing these characters and their music of voice were mostly New York-based musicians. The process was much of the same as the previous entries. Matsura and Watabe flew to New York, Chris Park scouted musicians to work on the game, and everyone collaborated to shape these characters. PaRappa the Rapper 2 still had American creativity baked into its DNA, still with some janky phrasing here and there.
Hey, you're pretty mature than I thought.
Most of the returning characters kept their original performers. Dread Fox once again was PaRappa, although the voice is slightly different and not as noticeably modified in post. Armstead Christian was PJ Barry and Papa PaRappa, Sara Ramirez was Lammy, and Rue Watabe was Chop Chop Master Onion, Joe Chin, Ma-san, and Captain Fusenpepper. As in previous games, Watabe was the only non-New York-based musician on the cast. However, not everyone from the original voice cast was able to return. Michelle Burks had moved to Texas by the time PaRappa 2 had begun recording. In her place as Katie Cat was Shannon White, another mystery musician with a somewhat common name. The second recast on the cast was for Sunny Funny. For unknown reasons, Kenya Hathaway was unable to reprise the Talking Flower, but she was replaced by, funny enough, another daughter of a famous musician, Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter Leah Lorien Alomar, known professionally as Leah Lorien. Lorien is the daughter of guitarist Carlos Alomar and vocalist Robin Clark. And the last of the recasts is everyone's favorite Rasta Flea MC King Kong Mushi, now played by vocalist Dean Bowman. Bowman also played a new teacher, Guru Ant. One more profile before we move on to new characters, and it's one that hasn't had a voice before. Sunny Funny's dad, General Potter, was played by John James III, a musician who has worked with the likes of Toto and the Pet Shop Boys. Now for the musicians playing the eclectic bunch of new characters in the PaRappa franchise. Jazz drummer, producer, and songwriter with a history in hip-hop, Ethan Eubanks played the ghostly founder of Beardburger, the Beardburger Master. Eubanks contributed greatly to the Beardburger Master song and characterization. All the spoken bits during the track, including the famous "My buns are very toasty," were all lines he improvised while recording. Eubanks was especially surprised that the toasty buns line was kept, seeing as that's rather, suggestive. But hey, it was good enough for the team to even name the song after it. Eubanks a few years later would make the music and lyrics to the Ho and Poke rap in collaboration with Andrew Sherman. So there you go, that's the connection to Pokemon. Kimberly Hassel, known professionally as Queen Amina, was the voice of Instructor Mussolini's sister, Instructor Musasia. Freedom Bremner voiced Hairdresser Octopus and PaRappa's boombox Boxy Boy. The staff wanted Hairdresser Octopus to be Latin, so Bremner gave the mollusk a Puerto Rican accent. As for Boxy Boy, well, that's Bremner's voice, just obviously given the Alvin and the Chipmunks treatment. You may also know Bremner for singing the theme song for Clifford's Puppy Days and a few songs in Teen Titans Go and the US version of the Mr. Men show. Yes, really. Oh boy. We're finally talking about him. The game's main antagonist, Colonel Noodle, or Colonel Noodles, the game uses both, was played by bassist and guitarist Andy Alonso. Alonso has a funny story about how he came up with one of the most beloved voices in the game. He based it off his son's friend as a kid. Alonso recounted in an interview with Amber Jones that the kid in question always sounded like he had hay fever and compared it to Tommy Pickles from Rugrats. However, that's a cute and innocent kid that wanted to see if Alonso's son could play. Colonel Noodle is pissed. So Alonso added that angry energy to the voice, and thus we got one of the best voices in the entire 3-game saga.
I know. I gotta believe!
And what the heck, one more voice actor profile. Greenblatt himself appears in this game as a news reporter voiced by himself. That's a nice little cameo. This game has one more thing I've yet to mention. PaRappa 2 has multiplayer. PaRappa 2 quite famously has multiplayer.
Chinese, 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 anything goes, even Chinese.
The video you're seeing here, simply titled Chinese, was blessed by the algorithm over the years and has amassed millions of views. Moreover, it perfectly sums up the PaRappa 2 multiplayer experience. Unlike Jammer Lammy, where players work off a static rhythm map together to beat a stage or against each other for the higher score, players in PaRappa 2 do a rap battle on a set portion of a song from the game where each subsequent turn they try to score more points by freestyling better and making the rhythm chart more complex. But then after a while, the players get bored and make the characters do funny things, points be damned.
Thanks, brother, like I'm the thanks.
As with prior entries, the game had English text available in the Japanese version, so importing the game was no problemo for fans and critics wanting to get it ahead of time. The game wouldn't come to North American shores until January 23rd, 2002, and in Europe on April 5th that same year. There were some changes for every version outside Japan. International versions, of course, received a new title screen animation, seeing as in Japanese it's, well, in Japanese, and the vocals sync up to the text. But these releases also had changed scoring text in the HUD to only have the first letter capitalized, while in Japan they're in all caps. Speaking of text, the English script in the Japanese version is full of typos, most of which were corrected for the international release. Just like with Jam Lammy, PaRappa the Rapper 2 had to go through some changes when coming to North America, while Europe got the original content intact. The changes to the American version of PaRappa 2 were nowhere near as extensive as they were for Jam Lammy, so luckily for the dev team, there was no emergency requests for brand new cutscenes or anything. Sony likely wanted PaRappa 2 to keep that nice family-friendly E for everyone rating. So to make that happen, the ESRB was not okay with the line in Stage 1, "We cook the best, tastes better than wine," due to the alcohol reference. The line was changed in the American version to, "We cook the best, you better get in line." The E10 Plus rating was still a couple years out from being ushered in with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat expanding the ratings chart. So it was either get rid of the alcohol or boom, big bad T for teen rating, or at least the risk of it. My buns are very toasty though, was apparently totally fine. Just a quick sidebar while talking about the Beard Burger Master, there is an alternate take of Toast the Buns in the in-game record shop, as well as the PaRappa 2 official soundtrack during the boss rush level where PaRappa is playing a virtual reality game. Inexplicably, that version uses Warm the Buns. Anyways, back to censorship. Guru Ant calling himself the Lord had to be replaced by him referring to himself as the man in both his own stage and the virtual reality stage. That's it as far as lyrics, but there are still graphical changes to note, specifically sexual content? Underneath Instructor Musasha's tutu is a pair of panties, but in the North American version she was given shorts. Additionally, the jump rope machines in Instructor Musasha's stage originally looked like they were wearing bikinis, but in the US it was changed to look like a dress. And lastly, the load save icon in the options menu had a slash added in between the words to make more grammatical sense. Whew, that actually wasn't so bad. Despite all the additions, PaRappa's new game did not impress critics. PaRappa the Rapper 2 currently sits at a 67 on Metacritic, a far cry from the original game and Jam Lammy's more favorable scores. While the new soundtrack received praise, the quirky character designs retained the charm of the previous games, and the difficulty being easier than Lammy was very much welcomed, critics felt PaRappa 2 didn't offer much in the way of new content. And it wasn't just new content, it was content period, at least for the price point. The harder difficulty modes and multiplayer weren't exactly doing it for critics as far as extending the playtime. Eurogamer's Martin Taylor straight up said in the conclusion to his 7 out of 10 review, quote, "I could wholeheartedly recommend PaRappa 2 to any PS2 owner were it a bit cheaper, but the shocking lack of replay value really does set it back, and that's a real shame," unquote. PaRappa 2 was as quirky as prior entries, if not more so, but that and its fun tunes weren't going to carry it anymore. PaRappa 1 got away with it because its gameplay was unlike anything seen before, but PaRappa 2 failed to meaningfully innovate in the eyes of gamers, and asking for full PS2 game price was a bit much. Add on the fact the title had a minimal ad campaign in Europe and the US, and honestly just how big of a year 2002 was for the PS2 with the likes of Kingdom Hearts and GTA Vice City launching later that year, yeah, PaRappa 2 was just a face in the crowd. I couldn't find any reliable sales numbers for the game other than VG charts, which, this can't be right, can it? But I really don't think we need numbers to conclude this game was more than likely another commercial flop. This is where the PaRappa franchise effectively ended, or I guess went on indefinite hiatus. After the proper sequel, everyone went their separate ways and there were no more sequels. PaRappa was gone but not forgotten. I mean, how could players forget? Kick, punch, it's all in the mind, right? That's a gaming moment so iconic that it was used in TV commercials for ringtone site Iromedo Mix and mobile game site Dwango 7 with Japanese music sensation Gackt starting on July 1st, 2003. In the commercial, called the Scouting Edition, Gackt peeps in on PaRappa and Chop Chop Master Onion rapping in the Fruits Dojo, then pops in and says he wants PaRappa's voice. And his voice he got as DreadFox recorded some new lines for the commercial and ringtone site. The second commercial was called the Work Edition, which shows PaRappa ditching a rap session with his Tamanegi sensei, once again played by Ryu Watabe, because he had to go to work and call Gackt.
Huh? What's wrong?
I gotta go to work now.
Hey, wait! Walk? What walk?
Telephone call. Moshi moshi. Pick it up.
Hey, Gackt です。
The collab added a mobile phone version of PaRappa the Rapper to the site Dwango7, creatively titled PaRappa the Rapper Mobile. As far as I'm aware, this mobile game is now lost media. Glad PaRappa could find some work during the franchise's indefinite hiatus. In the West during this time, Robot Chicken parodied PaRappa a few times, and it's Robot Chicken. The punchlines are a bit too crude to show here, and stuff coming up is bad enough to possibly trigger the dreaded yellow dollar sign. Hey, if nothing else, it shows how many people were at least aware of PaRappa over in the States. During the 2000s, rhythm games kept evolving and becoming more popular globally, and the next big things in the genre were about to launch, partially thanks to PaRappa pushing a certain company in the right direction. Harmonix Music Systems Inc. was founded in 1995 by MIT grads Aaron Agozi and Alex Rogopoulos. Early on, the duo had a few interactive music projects, but nothing was really making business take off. After heading to Japan to try their hand and then fail at entering the karaoke market, they came across the growing body of rhythm games in the late 90s and early 2000s, Rogopoulos citing Beatmania, DDR, and PaRappa the Rapper. In an interview with IGN, Rogopoulos noted, quote, "I was grinning from ear to ear playing PaRappa the Rapper, and I think at that point we realized video games is how we can do what we're trying to do, where you have this incentive structure for long-term engagement, and second of all, where there's an actual business model to pay the bills," unquote. The company launched their first title, Frequency, on the PS2 on November 20th, 2001, but the company would finally take off with launching the Karaoke Revolution and Guitar Hero franchises. The first Karaoke Revolution game launched in North America on November 5th, 2003, and the first Guitar Hero game launched in North America on November 8th, 2005. The direct inspiration for Guitar Hero was obviously Konami's Guitar Freaks. We're really coming full circle with this. But Rogopoulos credits PaRappa the Rapper as being quote-unquote transformative for Harmonix. The year after Guitar Hero debuted would mark 10 years since PaRappa hit the gaming scene. In commemoration of the PaRappa franchise 10-year anniversary, Sony announced a port of the first game in the series to the PlayStation Portable on September 18th and then released in Japan on December 7th, just one day after the 10-year anniversary proper. Sony confirmed on April 30th, 2007 that PaRappa's portable port was heading to North America on July 7th. Strangely though, that was when the game came out in Europe. North America would get the game on July 17th. Not long after being present at the first quote-unquote scaled-back E3 conference that year. The PSP game was also showcased during Sony's Gamer Day that year in San Diego on May 17th. Australia would get the title on August 9th. So, what's new with the PSP ports? Honestly, not much, and that was a known fact from the get-go. It's the classic PaRappa experience on the go, but with a few enhancements. For instance, the game has refined graphics, as far as the PSP goes anyways, and a widescreen aspect ratio, with the 4:3 original still being selectable in the options menu. The game also has a 4-player ad hoc multiplayer mode where players can rap head-to-head for a high score. The game also used the power of the internet to provide players 8 free downloadable remixes of levels in the game. The rhythm maps were still the same and players still had to beat the accompanying stages first, but it was at least something to switch things up. Players could also send a demo of Stage 1 to another PSP console, and that's it. The rest of the game is just like the PS1 version, but there are some minor changes that previously were different between versions. All versions of the game use the international PS1 version's translucent text on the loading screen, and the try again screen plays the duck and horn sounds on loop in every region. Remember, the American version changed that previously. However, there were 2 other notable changes in the North American version. 1, there are no other text language options in the menu, only English. 2, there was censorship in the game. Not for alcohol or moose panties, but for legal reasons. In the opening cutscene, PJ Barry and Katie Cat both order Frosties. Because Frosty is a registered trademark of American fast food chain Wendy's, the game abruptly mutes that word from both their orders.
And I'll take a giant spicy fries, giant vanilla, and cherry pie.
A junior chunky burger, curly fries, and a large chocolate, please.
This audio is kept in the other versions of the game. Heck, Wendy's has had separate legal battles of its own over in Europe. Speaking of Europe, all versions of this game outside Japan omit the teaser of PaRappa 2 from the ending. The PlayStation K9's Encore didn't receive any TV spots or magazine ads for its international releases. Instead, SCEA opted to celebrate and quote-unquote advertise PaRappa's little comeback using the internet. On June 27, 2007, SCEA announced Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap Showdown, a video contest where entrants could film themselves rapping the coolest to either Chop Chop Master Onion's, Instructor Mussolini's, or Cheep Cheep the Cooking Chicken's raps. The performance had to be a cappella, so no background music, but beatboxing was fine. Up for grabs was a grand prize of a travel package including airfare and hotel to Penny Arcade Expo in Seattle from August 24th through 26th, an event at which Sony was further advertising the game by having a PaRappa mascot walking about. Grand prize winners would also get 2 PSP consoles with 2 copies of PaRappa the Rapper. Finalists got a copy of the PaRappa PSP game and some, quote, PaRappa branded premium items such as a PSP skin, PSP charm, and a PaRappa signature beanie ARV $60, unquote. Furthermore, the first 100 entrants got a limited edition Paul Frank t-shirt. Neat. Although I'm not even sure if 100 people entered. 7 of the top 10 entries are lost to time, but the other 3 are still online to this day. Momo the Monster made this clever video where he is both Chop Chop Master Onion and PaRappa, all in the POV of playing the game. Adam Stackhouse performed the Cheep Cheep rap with his then 11-year-old sister. It's super cute. And the last entry is... no. Fine. I gotta do it. It's for the kids. Thanks again to everyone who donated to Extra Life to make this episode happen, because this was hell to research. Not because it wasn't hard to find stuff, because it was hard to dig through the details. Ugh. So the last of the top 10 entries was by Christian Weston Chandler, now Christine Weston Chandler, aka Chris Chan. For those who have no idea who Chris Chan is, I'm sorry in advance. For those who do know who Chris Chan is, you know where this is going. Chris Chan is a rather infamous internet cryptid, so to speak. I don't even want to say lolcow because I think this case goes further than that. I'm usually professional with these things. I'll refer to people by their last names, but here I'm just going to call this figure Chris. Now, I know Chris is now legally a female, but I've heard this was due to ulterior motives. And the quote-unquote fanbase still uses male pronouns when referring to Chris, and the subreddit has a rule saying not to argue about Chris's pronouns. I don't know what the right answer is, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask. So I'm just going to use they, them to be safe. Anyways, we're off to a great start. Chris rose to infamy with their Sonichu fan comic, a fusion of Sonic the Hedgehog and Pikachu, and was being closely watched out of amusement by the internet. It's too much to document and is beyond the scope of talking about PaRappa. So for the sake of this video and my own sanity, we're going to stay in the scope of PaRappa. I am including this story in this video because it is part of the Western PaRappa the Rapper lore, I guess. To get into it, Chris entered Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap Showdown, and it's how 99% of people are even aware this contest ever took place. Of the 3 songs available to rap along to, Chris decided to roll with Chop Chop Master Onion's rap, as they claimed it was the only rap they knew because they only played a demo of the game from a poor woman wrapped up in the Chris Chan saga named Megan Schroeder. For context, for f***'s sake, Chris had been pursuing Schroeder for a couple years by this point, and she let him know, in no uncertain terms, she was not interested. Chris seemed to think a PSP and a trip to Seattle would change her mind. The hope was to win her heart by winning the contest and then do stuff in private, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. So Chris fired up their PSI camera and, once finished, edited footage using the iCreate software for eye-popping effects. After doing a bit of Ruckersville freestyling, Chris went into the rap. Chris claimed this was the only PaRappa song they knew, but they apparently didn't know it that well. Chris had to awkwardly read the lyrics off a printed sheet on a tripod, got some of the lyrics flat out wrong, and sang some of the spoken parts, such as when PaRappa enters cool mode. After 3 minutes of jumping and flailing around, Chris looked exhausted. And I guess Chris was feeling those creative juices flowing and decided to do one more bit of freestyling, this time about Guitar Hero.
Guitar Hero on PlayStation 3. Don't press the PS button after select things, see? Make sure you hook it up with the converter controller. Do rock on, yo. Na-na-na-na-na-na.
I'm gonna take a second to shake off my secondhand embarrassment. Okay, so on July 18th, Chris got an email from PlayStation Community Support that their video had reached the voting phase, then letting Schroeder know. Chris used many platforms to ask people to vote. In fact, Chris made a bunch of dummy accounts to vote for it too. They even asked their half-brother Cole Smithy to vote too, but Smithy said he'd only vote on the condition that Chris find the identity of Cole's real father. What the This whole situation evidently strained their complicated relationship based on emails exchanged. It's thanks to Chris's desperation to win that we know of every single top 10 entry, including the ones that are no longer available on YouTube. On their PSN blog, Chris spoke middlingly of the other entries while gassing up their own. The author of Sonichu was even so bold as to put their martial arts routine as number 1. Once voting was rap, 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 that's a wrap on August 1st, by some fucking miracle, Chris placed 7th. I don't know, maybe they could have placed 6th if they found the identity of Cole's real dad in time. Adam Stackhouse's Chief rap won the hearts of voters and thus the contest. Stackhouse said he gave one of the PSPs and all the quote-unquote swag to his sister while he took a buddy with him to hit up PAX. Upon finding out Stackhouse was the winner, Chris accepted the loss and moved on. Obviously, that's a lie. This is Chris Chan we're talking about. And this era of Christry was called the Stackhouse Saga for a reason. Chris developed a hatred for Stackhouse. A burning, vengeful hatred. Adam ruined everything. Gone were the plans of bringing Megan to PAX, having a daughter named Crystal, and living happily ever after. Chris believes Stackhouse, as well as a few others, had cheated. For one, some videos had background music, although it was made apparent during the contest making an a cappella backing track was fine. Momo mentioned in the description of his entry that he checked with the Sony rep about his a cappella backing track and received approval, so Chris seemed to have misinterpreted the rule as no background music, period. Secondly, several entries also had other people in their videos, which apparently was against the rules. Sure, they all cheated, but you know, making sock puppet accounts to vote for your own entry, totally fine. Funny enough, Chris broke the rules already by changing the lyrics to the song they played. I don't know, maybe Sony decided to relax the rules because of a lack of entries. In any case, Chris unsurprisingly made a big stink about it. The Ruckersville internet icon also emailed SCEA about the rules being violated and asked others to do the same. Of course, they got a canned response on August 10th and nothing became of it. Then in the video CWC is Angry uploaded that same month, Chris took a toy Megatron pistol and shot at a photo of Stackhouse for about 2 minutes straight. This was Chris's way of venting about all the quote-unquote freakazoid videos that quote-unquote cheated in the PaRappa contest. All this undue harassment from Chris, including a comment threatening everyone who quote-unquote cheated in the contest, prompted Stackhouse to respond. Quote, "I'm working on getting the lawyers and such in line. You'll hear from me soon, Chris." Unquote. Thankfully, nothing became of this, and Adam and his family are unharmed. On a video Chris uploaded on September 24th, 2008, they made it clear, quote, "Adam Stackhouse and I are on peaceful terms and have put that contest thing behind us," unquote, with Chris asking others to leave the Stackhouses be. It was not long after the contest that Megan Schroeder would leave Chris's life. For a variety of reasons you can look up yourself. I've seen too much. Chris's attempts to woo her with a free trip to Seattle failed, and time went on. Since all this went down, Adam Stackhouse has been doing pretty well for himself. As of 2011, he co-owns a successful production company in Richmond, Virginia called AV Adventure Productions, Stackhouse himself having even won 2 Emmys. The man did a TEDx talk in 2013, but all the comments on the video are references to the PaRappa contest and Chris Chan. This comment says it best, quote, "No matter how much he achieves in life, the shadow of Christian Weston Chandler will follow this man for life," unquote. Fast forward to MagFest 2018, and by sheer coincidence, Adam Stackhouse and Chris Chan were both in attendance. Stackhouse attended a panel about Chris Chan in which Chris was in attendance, and that's where the two, over a decade later, settled their differences a bit more formally. Thus ends the saga of Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap Showdown. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take a shower because I spent way too much time talking about this. And believe it or not, this is not the only Western PaRappa the Rapper story to escalate to someone issuing threats. With all that drama out of the way, let's wrap up talking about the PSP game. Currently, this version of the game has a 67 on Metacritic, coincidentally the same Metascore as PaRappa 2. I made this point when talking about PaRappa 2, and it hits harder here. Back in the late 90s, PaRappa the Rapper's roughly 1 hour game time was made up for by its charm and originality. This was 10 years later, and a simple PSP port was not cutting it for critics. While the music held up and the title was nostalgic for many critics, the gameplay was outdated and the limited new features like downloadable music did not justify a purchase in the eyes of reviewers. Rhythm games had a firmly established market come 2007, which is especially true with Guitar Hero having hit the scene so recently and Rock Band debuting a few months after this little PSP trip down memory lane. Come 2007, there were still no big rhythm games that promoted creativity like PaRappa did. Masaya Matsuda wanted to be the change he wanted to see in the gaming world, and on December 10th, 2007, Nana Onsha announced Matsuda and Greenblatt would be collabing again for the first time since PaRappa 2. This new video game would be launching on the Nintendo Wii in late 2008 with Majestic serving as the publisher. The game's title was formally announced on January 31st, 2008 as being Major Minor's Majestic March, or Meija Maji March in Japan. As the title suggests, the game was to focus on leading a marching band, quite the departure from rap and rock and roll. Just over a week after M4's formal announcement, because I am not saying Major Minor's Majestic March every time, Matsuda presented at the DICE Summit in Las Vegas and encouraged game developers to move on from quote-unquote licensed play-along games. In his presentation, he also issued a warning, quote, "We're wasting our use of music. The contents of a game are passion and energy. If they become subordinate to other factors, it is game over," unquote. So did M4 revolutionize and reinvigorate the industry in late 2008? About that, M4 was delayed to 2009. According to Greenblatt, when discussing the game's development, quote, "Pretty much everything went wrong. I could write a book about the compounded mistakes made by hardworking and talented people," unquote. The US received the game on March 24th, Japan on April 23rd, and Europe on June 26th. The game being called a flop would be the biggest understatement in the video. M4 only sold 600 copies in its first 2 days in Japan, and critics in the West panned the game thoroughly. Mind you, the game retailed for $39.99 US MSRP, a whopping $10 less than the average Wii game, and it still failed to move units. There's more to the tragic tale of Major Minor's Majestic March, but I feel that's best saved for its own video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see an episode dedicated to talking about this game. Unfortunately, Matsuda's warning came true. M4's failure was from a lot going wrong, but even if it somehow managed to do everything right, music game sales saw a 50% decline in 2009. That number fell increasingly in years to follow. The music game bubble burst. The market was super oversaturated. Combine that with the effects of the Great Recession, and the once hot commodity of music games faded. Of course, the licensed rhythm game genre didn't die out entirely, looking at you, Just Dance. It just fell greatly from its former glory. So what does this mean for PaRappa? Was he destined to be a forgotten relic? Well, no. Sony released Lammy as a PS1 classic on the PlayStation Store, launching October 1st, 2009 in the US. A couple years later, PaRappa the Rapper was referenced in the final episode of Funimation's dub of Crayon Shinchan. The Kappa that Shin befriends is named PaRappa the Kappa in the dub.
Meet PaRappa the Kappa. It's a pleasure to meet you, PaRappa.
Of all the things I thought we'd come full circle on in English version files, well, it certainly wasn't this. Anyways, let's get to PaRappa's next major appearance. Over 10 years after PaRappa's last new game, and 5 years after PaRappa's last game period, the Rappin' Dog would appear in the 2012 PlayStation 3 and Vita game PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Finally, I have an excuse to talk about this game. Developed by a team from Sony Santa Monica, first called Broodworks and then Superbot Entertainment, work on this crossover began in 2009, being given the tentative name of Title Fight. The game was always planned to be a mashup with playable PlayStation icons, but before becoming a brawler, Title Fight went a bit into development as a mission-based game with large maps that required platforming, objectives consisting of things like capture the flag. It didn't take long for the game to shift gears towards being PlayStation's answer to Super Smash Bros. No matter the form it took, PaRappa was planned to be part of the roster early on. The greenlight pitch trailer shown to Sony even featured PaRappa kicking Kratos in the face. At this point in development, PaRappa was rather fat and toothy. He'd be slimmed down and less grinny for the final game. Chop Chop Master Onion and Lammy, who also had that weird chubby look, can also be seen on a character select screen, both grayed out. However, it's worth noting that not every character shown in early character select screens were necessarily planned to be playable. Many of the grayed out portraits across beta builds were just placeholders, with some exceptions like Buzz, from that quiz game. The PlayStation crossover's existence and concept were hinted at through a series of job listings, surveys, and leaks before being officially unveiled to the public on April 26, 2012 on Game Trailers TV with Jeff Keighley. Yes, the Game Awards guy. The brawler was originally scheduled to launch in October that year, but was pushed back a month for balancing, launching in North America on November 20th, Europe on the 21st, Australia on the 22nd, the UK on the 23rd, and Japan on January 31st, 2013. Leading up to its release, Superbot showed off PlayStation All-Stars at various conventions and expos, gradually revealing more characters along the way. And then the whole roster, stage list, and many other details about the game were leaked online from a beta build well ahead of release. Leaks be damned, Superbot had some fun advertising the game at events, such as these shirts with teams on them, one of them being Team PaRappa. It was great to see PaRappa get some proper love again. What did Ronnie Greenblatt think of this comeback? While he was happy to see PaRappa return to the spotlight, he was, quote, not so happy about him being in a weapon-filled battle game, unquote. Although he did admit the game was fun. Greenblatt hoped this crossover would be Sony's wake-up call that PaRappa still had potential. The character selection was limited by budget, decisions by Sony, and negotiations with other game companies. Hence why this game didn't have Dante from Devil May Cry, it had Dante from the then upcoming DMC, the one everyone likes to forget. Superbot wanted to have big names like Crash, Spyro, and Lara Croft, but they just couldn't make that happen for a variety of reasons. For the characters they could get, the team tried to make each fighter feel authentic, which included voiceover. PlayStation All-Stars was recorded at Sound Deluxe Design Music Group in California, and the voice director on the project was David W. Collins, who also served as the sound design manager and the in-game announcer. Almost every single character in the game was played by their original voice actor, and this included Dread Fox as PaRappa. Fox was approached about the project during the holiday season of 2011, then flown out to the studio in Cali to record his lines a few months later. This was his first time voicing PaRappa in over a decade, not counting the Gakuto commercials. But according to him, quote, after 10 plus years, it feels like I never left, unquote. The main dog himself wasn't the only PaRappa Town resident to have a voice actor in this game. Each playable character in PlayStation All-Stars has their own story in the single-player mode about why they're going on a journey to fight other video game characters, told through a slideshow, usually with accompanying voiceover. In PaRappa's, Joe Chin launches his own comic book, which impressed PaRappa's friends. In hopes of becoming a big-shot hero like Mr. Chin, PaRappa's gotta believe and goes on a quest to kick, punch, and chop his way to the top. After clearing the campaign and obtaining a wealth of new power, PaRappa planned to head to Club Fun with his friends to show off his quote-unquote new style. Oh, and Joe Chin went missing, and they're all kinda like, oh no. Anyways, in these cutscenes, PaRappa can be seen with his buddies PJ Barry, Sunny Funny, and Katie Cat. While Armstead Christian returned to play the Hungry Ursine, Sunny Funny's original performer Kenya Hathaway returned to voice her instead of her newer actress Leia Lorien. Once again, Katie Cat had a brand new voice actress, this time being multi-talented singer Charlene Carmone. And a PaRappa appearance never feels right if Chop Chop Master Onion doesn't show up too. PaRappa's stage in PlayStation All-Stars begins in the Fruits Dojo, with Chop Chop Master Onion in the background, once again played by Ru Watanabe. Before the game launched, Dread Fox uploaded a video of him recording some PaRappa lines for PlayStation All-Stars in the booth. During the game's story mode, every character has a quote-unquote rival they would encounter and defeat to progress, complete with cutscenes where the characters interact. The cutscenes even differ between rivals. This recording made it evident that PaRappa's rival would be Spike from Ape Escape.
Lay off him, Spike. He's just a little monkey. It looks like he's just having fun to me. Don't you like having fun?
What are you doing? I almost had him.
Lay off him, Spike. He's just a little monkey.
Those little monkeys are trying to take over the planet.
It looks like he's just having fun to me. Don't you like having fun?
I mentioned earlier PaRappa's franchise is pretty non-violent, so how the heck does he fight? Well, he uses the karate skills he learned from Chop Chop Master Onion as well as skateboarding and the power of music. Yeah, his level 3 super sees him rapping so cool that it KOs everyone instantly. And there's more PaRappa content in the game too. Every character in the game had additional costumes, not just colors, but actual costumes, which also had selectable alternate colors. PaRappa received a Funky Gi from the PaRappa anime as an in-game unlockable costume, Funky Astro Suit from PaRappa 2 as a pre-order bonus costume, and Prom King from the PaRappa anime as a paid DLC costume. Although I think this one makes him look more like Detective Conan than anything. Furthermore, PJ Barry and Instructor Mussolini could be used in the game as minions. No, not those minions. Minions in PlayStation All-Stars are little avatars that pop up during matches in the intro and outro, and when a player scores a double or triple kill. PJ is an unlockable, while Mussolini is paid DLC. And as one final thing, Sackboy's level 1 super sees him dressed as another character in the Send Upwards. One of the possibilities is PaRappa riding a skateboard. Cute. Alas, PlayStation All-Stars was not long for this world. Despite the game selling over 1 million copies, Sony cut ties with Superbot Entertainment on February 4th, 2013. Mere months after the game's release and only 10 days before the first DLC character pack dropped, resulting in Superbot handing further in-development DLC characters to Sony Santa Monica. And the last batch of DLC would ultimately be Zeus from God of War and Isaac Clarke from Dead Space as fighters, and a stage mashing up Medieval and the unfinished Swan. Things kinda went out on a whimper. Unfortunately, work-in-progress DLC for Dart from The Legend of Dragoon and Abe from Oddworld was cancelled, as well as a stage mashing up Gravity Rush and Journey. There was also DLC in development for Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden, and Tomba, or Tombi if you're from Europe, from the series of the same name. Fans tried their best to campaign for the PlayStation platform fighter to continue development, or to at least get the finished versions of the incomplete Dart and Abe DLC. But sadly, this was the short-lived tale of PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Well, okay, there was one more thing. The last update the game received was a massive balance patch that also added extra costumes for Zeus and Isaac Clarke. To connect this back to PaRappa, the silver lining to all this was the revitalized interest in PaRappa the Rapper, a franchise that had been dormant for 10 years not counting re-releases or ports. DreadFox was on board to see this hip-hop hound return for another adventure and actively advocated for fans to sign a petition. Sadly, fan movements to get PaRappa a new game didn't go anywhere, and the franchise simply remained a nostalgic favorite. While public opinion about PaRappa rose in the early to mid-2010s, public opinion about PaRappa's voice actor DreadFox was about to plummet. Oh yeah, you knew I had to bring up this story. This dreadful DreadFox story began right before PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale launched. A little over a month before All-Stars dropped, Cameron Perry, aka Camjo Z, was planning to host an animation collab on Newgrounds to celebrate the release of the Sony Brawler. He was going to have his animation feature Sackboy and PaRappa, and what better way to take his little cartoon to the next level than having PaRappa's official voice actor on board? He and his friend Jacob Collins hit up Fox on Facebook that October to see if the rapper would be down to say 10 voice lines as the paper-thin pup, to which Fox agreed, but he'd need $50 to $100 up front to record on his quote-unquote computer partner's equipment. Now, it's worth noting Perry was in college and Collins was in high school, so they weren't exactly made of money. But if that was all that stood between them and PaRappa the Rapper himself voicing their fan project, in their minds, it was worth it. After some difficulties with payment methods, the pair pitched in $30 each and sent it to Fox, to which he promised to have the finished product, quote, by week's end or weekend, unquote. Remember, this exchange happened just over a month out from PlayStation All-Stars' launch date. Perry excitedly announced on the Newgrounds BBS thread for the collab that Fox was going to voice PaRappa for Perry's part of the collab. Of course, it wouldn't be so easy. Not only did Fox claim he was running into some trouble with recording on his buddy's equipment, but somehow, someway, Fox's management caught wind of this little fan project. According to Fox, he needed to bump up the price from $60 to the full $100 he originally asked for because he was an AFTRA union member. And this all reeks of bullshit. Fox either told his management or he was making this part up to have an excuse to charge more. Because Collins really wanted to make this happen, he paid the last $40 himself. This transaction happened on October 23rd, about a month out from release day. Fox promised the lines by Friday, October 26th. I'm sure you're sensing a theme here. Hurricane Sandy hit New York City on October 29th, and as can be expected, Fox went quiet for a while. He got back to Collins on November 9th and explained the lines were done but got lost due to the hurricane. Really? It's not like the hurricane sneaked up on the city, but I digress, it's another lame excuse. Fox said he'd get the lines recorded by the 15th. Did that happen? Of course not. November 19th, the day before PlayStation All-Stars was set to launch in North America, Fox reached out again. He said he was having computer problems and claimed if he couldn't get those lines recorded and sent by the end of the week, he'd refund the guys. Now, I wouldn't be here talking about this if that's where the story ended. As expected, Fox neither got those lines recorded by the end of the week nor gave a refund. Instead, Fox bought a damn iPad, which got quote-unquote stolen. How convenient. Come December 5th, Perry dropped the collab. Not only had Fox not delivered those lines, but Perry had also been ill and was busy with schoolwork. On January 13th, mind you, this is almost 2 months after the game launched and 3 months after getting in contact with them, Fox hit up Perry's inbox about the project. He once again promised to upload quote-unquote tomorrow. If that didn't pan out, instead of sending the boys back their money, he was offering a free project. Come March, Perry and Collins were understandably frustrated. The frustrations were apparent in a long message Perry sent to Fox. While Perry didn't share the whole thing publicly, he shared the important paragraph that set off alarm bells for the rapper. Perry threatened legal action. Sure, it was a bluff, but Fox kept handing out excuses. The answer this time being he'd get them the money, quote, as soon as he gets on his feet financially, unquote. This story has entered November 2013. The PaRappa voice actor handed the duo another excuse. He had surgery, promising $25 to $30 by next weekend. You can't make this shit up. On December 5th, 2013, enough was enough, and the info about this situation went public. Perry made a blog aptly titled PaRappa the Scammer. The first post detailing Perry and Collins' long, frustrating ordeal of dealing with Dread Fox's bullshit. From here, things escalated even further. Fox tried to sick his quote-unquote 500 million fans on these guys and framed them as the bad guys. This resulted in essentially a war of Fox sending lies and playground-level insults, convincing his fans that Perry and Collins were in the wrong, while others in the loop called out Fox for being a scammer. Amidst all this happening, the voice actor of PaRappa told Perry in a DM to drop you can probably fill in the blank. Once this part happened, Perry posted the story to NeoGAF, further drawing attention to the situation. Now, during all this, Fox kept saying he was on good terms with Collins. Fox made a post on March 15th, 2014 with the claim he'd send Collins the $100 on April 1st. I suppose it's rather fitting that's April Fool's Day because, well, that money was never sent. The final post on the PaRappa the Scammer blog went live on May 1st, 2014, with further details on what had happened since Fox was exposed. Perry had previously offered to delete the blog if Fox just paid him and Collins back, and this final blog entry issued that reminder. Now, this part was left out of the blog, but during an interview with the John Chairs, Perry dropped a pretty big reveal. DreadFox sent him an unhinged, threatening email. After this happened, Perry's mom advised him to stop contacting Fox, and the police chose not to pursue this. Perry further decided to not post on the blog again as to not quote-unquote exacerbate the issue. Sure enough, here we are over a decade later with that blog still online. Everything Fox did to try and make Collins and Perry seem like the villains of the story backfired, and for many years Fox was seen as a childish asshole scammer. It's probably no wonder the guy hasn't done any interviews since all this went down. We'll catch up on Fox's latest whereabouts later. If you want to hear a more detailed version of this story and hear what Perry and Collins are up to now, check out the video by the John Chairs chronicling this Dread Fox saga. Link is on screen and in the description. Whew. To close out this section on a lighter note, according to God of War Ragnarok, in the God of War universe, the PlayStation All-Stars tournament happened, and PaRappa was said to be quote-unquote history's greatest musician. That's right, PaRappa is technically canon in God of War. Okay, but in all seriousness, according to one of the game's writers, Anthony Birch, he didn't think that PlayStation All-Stars line would make it into the final game, but it did, and it's a treat. Things were quiet again for the franchise until PaRappa 2 received an enhanced re-release on PS4 on December 15th, 2015, with features like trophy support and upscaled visuals. The series was approaching its 20th anniversary, and in celebration of this milestone and the 15th anniversary of the anime, the series got a short anime in Japan starring PJ Barry, titled PJ Barry's Munching Mumbling. The pilot aired on August 18th, 2016, and the actual anime debuted in October on Fuji TV, each episode having a runtime of about 96 seconds. A short anime is fine and dandy and all, but during the PlayStation Experience 2016 at the Anaheim Convention Center on December 3rd, just a few days before the 20-year anniversary, Sony announced a PlayStation 4 port of PaRappa the Rapper. A demo of the remaster was made available on the PlayStation Store that same day. The event venue also had a PaRappa mascot wandering the show floor. There was also a PaRappa smartphone game by ForwardWorks announced around the same time and set to be released in Japan, but that never came to fruition. The full version of the PS4 PaRappa remaster launched everywhere except Japan on April 4th, 2017. Japan received the remaster on the 20th instead. If I had to hazard a guess as to why Japan had to wait, it'd be to coincide with the PaRappa the Rapper 20th Anniversary Cafe that ran from April 20th to May 31st at the Tokyo Skytree, which had the game playable at kiosks there. Japan received a physical release of this game, but internationally, PaRappa on PS4 was digital only. Coincidentally, PaRappa's good buddy Crash Bandicoot had his classic PlayStation trilogy remastered in 2017 as well. The difference was that Crash's games were remade from the ground up. PaRappa's was just for the first game, and it's just a port of the PSP game with higher res graphics, some higher quality audio, although PaRappa is louder than everything else for some reason, trophy support, and some accommodations for HD TV input delay. In the settings menu, Feel the Beat turns the player's controller into a metronome using vibration, and See the Beat makes PaRappa's head bigger on the rhythm chart when a button is pressed. What's more, this HD version of the game has a more forgiving input buffer, except for stage 4 for some reason, which makes it a nightmare to play on this version. No, seriously, this stage took me so many tries, but on every other stage, even stage 6, I got it first try no problem. Now, when I say this is just a port of the PSP game, I mean this actually is just a port of the PSP game, as in the game is running on a PSP emulator with the PaRappa PSP files. This includes the North American version removing the word Frosty. The game even lacks the PaRappa 2 teaser in the ending in the international versions. The emulator running PaRappa the Rapper can replace textures with higher quality versions, and run Lewis scripts for extra functionality. But there are some areas in the game where it's apparent this game was half-assed, like the rain in stage 5 when you're starting to fail. But thanks to how half-assed this port is, eager modders were able to play around with injecting other PSP games into the emulator. Just like the 10th anniversary remaster, the 20th anniversary remaster of PaRappa the Rapper was not impressing critics. While there's plenty of nostalgia for the hip-hop hero, the game's age was showing, and to be fair, its age had been showing for a while. This game being a half-hearted port, literally running on a custom emulator, meant this was more of a novelty than a must-have. The game currently has an oof-inducing 61 on Metacritic. One last thing before we move on, there is a special message in a text file named config-mu-ps4.txt in the game's files, featuring shoutouts to many people involved in the series and a special message for those that access the file. Quote, "If you're reading this message, congratulations! You win! We love you so much! You've made hacking great again!" Shout out to the cutting room floor for documenting a lot of this info. About a month after the release of PaRappa the Half-Assed Remaster, Masaya Matsuda launched a Kickstarter for a brand new rhythm game on PS4 and PC in collaboration with Gitaruman and Osu creator Keiichi Yano. The game was given the working title of Project Rap Rabbit and set to star a character named Totomaru, who is, what else, a rapping rabbit. The Kickstarter had a funding goal of roughly $1.1 million US, and the page boasted details about making a, quote, true evolution of rhythm action mechanics, unquote, much of which reflected Matsuda's ideas of freedom in rhythm games. The duo of creators set out to make rhythm action great again. If I had a nickel for every time I've made a reference to that phrase, I'd have to, you get the picture. It was 2017, Trump had just taken office. Alright, so tell me if you've heard this one before. This is a Kickstarter run by developers of dormant game franchises with fans that have been begging for new entries and denied them for one reason or another, and the campaign was presenting itself as a spiritual successor to said games. If you've kept up with video game fundraising campaigns, you can probably feel a mighty sense of deja vu. Even barring the fact people already felt burnt on past quote-unquote spiritual successor Kickstarters, this Rap Rabbit campaign was plagued with issues. The two most egregious problems were the page only having concepts of a plan as to how the game worked, and locking a Switch version behind an almost $5 million stretch goal. The team eventually posted a concept gameplay demo 11 days before the Kickstarter ended, and revamped the stretch goals to have a Switch version unlocked sooner, but by that point, the damage was already done, and it was too late to fix their mistakes. The campaign only raised roughly $200,000 of its lofty goal. As of now, nothing new has become of Project Rap Rabbit. Even with no new game proper, PaRappa has had appearances in other media. The Hip Hop Heroes series was referenced in the free downloadable PlayStation 5 game Astro's Playroom, and even more in its retail sequel Astrobot, which just won Game of the Year, by the way. The two games are 3D platformers that are big celebrations of the PlayStation, with hundreds of cameos through the robots dressing as iconic video game stars, as well as scenery and collectibles. There are several references to the PaRappa franchise in the games. In Astro's Playroom, there are, fittingly, 2 flat cardboard cutouts by the pool of Hotel Hop-A-Lot, one dressed as PaRappa and one rocking out like Lammy. Astrobot also has references to the series, including a bot, this one being 3D, dressed as PaRappa himself, even being shown in a pre-release trailer to the delight of the internet. The PaRappa bot's name is Lovestruck Lyricist. There's also a bot based on Lammy named Shredding Sheep. Both have gacha items, and after getting them and hitting PaRappa, well, check it out yourself. And Lammy, fitting to the bot's name, shreds. And what do you know, at the Crash site, they're both near each other and Crash Bandicoot. Nearly 30 years later, and PaRappa and Crash are still buddies. And Astrobot really put PaRappa the Rapper in the spotlight for completionists. Players that rescue all bots and find all puzzle pieces can take on the hardest stage in the game, the Great Master Challenge. Their reward for completing this tough-as-nails gauntlet? The Lyrical Master, a bot dressed as Chop Chop Master Onion. PaRappa also had a triple collab with Japanese fashion brand Wind & Sea and the National Basketball Association. This unexpected mashup titled Beat on the Court sees PaRappa and his paper-thin buddies appearing alongside the logos and branding of the NBA teams the Chicago Bulls, the New York Knicks, Boston Celtics, and Los Angeles Lakers. That's all really cool, but how has PaRappa maintained an active, passionate fan base and remained this relevant throughout almost 30 years? One thing I've held off on mentioning to this point is fan content, especially memes. There is a shocking amount of high-quality PaRappa video memes that mimic the style of the series and put PaRappa in humorously bizarre situations.
I slam my fingers in the car door. You slam your fingers in the car door.
Even barring the ones where it's mimicking that iconic flat look, there are other fan animations like this one from 2014, which saw a complete remake for its 10th anniversary in 2024. Oh, and I would be remiss not to bring up Coach Z from the web series Homestar Runner dressing like PaRappa for the 2017 Halloween special. Good job, brothers chaps.
Yeah, I got the Belarv. Kick, porch, it's all in the morn. Chorp, chorp, porch. Porch cork.
I could go on and on about fan content and cameos with this dog, but all of this is to say, despite only having a few games, PaRappa the Rapper is one of the coolest and most beloved cross-cultural collaborations of all time. Creatives from the East and West came together to make something wholly unique and change gaming and entertainment as we know it. The games became a highlight of many careers, not just Matsuda and Greenblatt, but the many vocalists that provided anywhere from a day or two to record lines or reprise their roles across games. Many musicians that were in the PaRappa games are still working today, most of whom have fond memories of recording this quirky little project, or projects. Sandra Williams shared in her interview with Mike Scholars that she still gets messages from fans online that share remixes of the driving test stage. On that note, what's Dreadfox been up to? As stated, he was thoroughly disgraced after all that fan project hubbub, but according to Amber Jones and content creator Kiwi Eater, Fox is still alive and well. He moved to Florida and is still active in the music scene. However, both creators have stated Fox struggles to do the PaRappa voice anymore. On his SoundCloud around the time PlayStation All-Stars was launching, the voice sounded rough. It seems Fox has really mellowed out since all the drama. But if Sony ever decides to make another PaRappa game, they'll need to either recast him or have him heavily modify the voice. PaRappa the Rapper's influence can still be seen in games today, one of the most notable examples being Scratch and Melody, a hip-hop inspired indie game which uses the PaRappa call and response music system that encourages freestyling. The lead developer LJ directly cited an obsession with the PaRappa games as well as Earthbound inspired indie game Undertale, the future funk music genre, and the Sonic the Hedgehog series as direct inspirations for Scratch and Melody. Heck, even the main character's design was inspired by PaRappa. Newgrounds' Friday Night Funkin' also has inspiration from PaRappa. It's another game inspired by hip-hop that uses a call and response system but plays more like a traditional rhythm game not allowing freestyling. But the biggest draw is all the custom mods of the game, including some that add PaRappa and pals. Additionally, one of the random messages during the intro sequence is, like PaRappa, but cooler. PaRappa the Rapper has influenced other media too, even the English translation of One Piece. Shut up, hear me out! Back in 2014, when Oda showed off Law's heartbreaking backstory in the Dressrosa arc, we're briefly introduced to Law's sister, Lammy. As a nod to the character with a similar but not quite the same name in Japanese, translator Stephen Paul spelled Lammy's name Lammy in the English translation of the manga. This spelling was also used in the English releases of the anime and on the English version of the One Piece World Top 100 site. Here's Paul confirming this in episode 340 of the One Piece podcast.
But yeah, now and of course that's where he left his sister Lammy, and a little Easter egg here, I chose that specific spelling for her name as a tribute to Jammer Lammy, the sequel to PaRappa the Rapper. So
get the hell out of here.
Even if the gameplay is essentially a prototype of games to follow it, I still think the PaRappa games are worth revisiting. If you haven't played them yet, the remastered version of the first game and 2015 souped up version of the second are on the PlayStation Store. Jammer Lammy is no longer available legally, but you can also Google other options. As for the anime, it's all on YouTube with English subs. And PlayStation All-Stars is stuck on the PlayStation 3 and Vita. If you've got the consoles, the game is inexpensive secondhand if you want to give it a go. Or, again, Google it. Thank you for sticking through to the end of my longest video yet. As always, thanks to all of my patrons and Twitch subs for supporting my videos. And a special shout out to the Mas Muchacho tier patron Coops. If you'd like to be listed here, have access to my supporter-only Discord server, and see videos before they come out on YouTube, please consider joining on either platform. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, share this video, and comment what you think of PaRappa the Rapper, how you discovered the series, what you like about it, all that good stuff, and any other topics you'd like to see me cover in the future. I've been doing English version files for almost 5 years, and I can't believe it took me this long to get to a video game series. I've done series with video games in them, and the closest thing I've covered to a game series is the live-action show Game Center CX. But PaRappa the Rapper is the first actual game series I've covered. I know there have been requests for other video game franchises, so stay tuned. This video was an absolute blast to make. I had heard of PaRappa years ago when it was new, but never played any of the games until around the time PlayStation All-Stars came out. Amazon had the PSP PaRappa game on sale for dirt cheap. I bought it, gave it a spin, and loved it. It's just so undeniably charming and memorable. It was cool checking out the rest of the info about the series and compiling it into one big video. I think what really sold me on pushing for it was the bit about Chris Chan. Look, I keep myself greatly separated from the Chris Chan drama overall. I hear things about it every once in a great while, so to immerse myself for better or worse to understand the drama behind that contest was something. Sorry I had to push this video back from its December launch window. I fell really ill with a nasty cold right before Christmas, and work on the video stalled until New Year's as a result. And since ad revenue plummets in January, I decided, hey, may as well iron out some of the kinks and take time to fine-tune it. So I hope it was worth the wait for everyone. Whether you're still with me and saw the whole video, or you're skipping to the end to see what's next, I see you in the analytics. Thank you for watching. Sorry to say, I don't have a next episode announcement right now. I need a bit to rest after taking on this daunting video, but stay tuned. Until then, I'll be doing a few smaller videos that aren't episodes of English version files, but in a similar vein. I hope you look forward to them. If you liked me talking about PaRappa, check out this video. YouTube thinks you'll like it, and you probably will. Until next time, take care, and remember, you gotta believe.